Okay, we have a couple things to get started real quick. The first one is, it would make me feel really good if you would pull out a songbook. This is a songbook. These have the songs that we sing inside of them, the pages. They're under your seat. We haven't used these in a long time. But if you would mark 682 in your songbook, that would be great, because I'm not entirely confident that the songs are going to come back when I do the thing that I'm about to do. So I'll be able to fix it eventually. I just want to be able to sing the song when it's time to sing the song. So maybe we will need it, and maybe we won't. Another thing that I need you to do, we're going through some text tonight together. And so I have John 7 and 8 on pages for you. And maybe you forgot to get one when you came in or did not get one. Stuart has the heap back there. If you need some of the text, would you raise your hand? And he's just going to come up the aisle. We'll get everybody situated so that you have what you need, and then I'll get started. Oh, that's nice. There we go. John chapter 7. You can do this with a pen or a pencil. I do it with colors. There's my key. Thank you for doing that. There's my key for the colors that I use. I don't care if you don't use my colors. I'm just telling you, in case we're going through tonight and you say, hey, what is that? I wonder what he's talking about. Use orange for sections. It helps me to see. Sometimes your Bible lays things out in paragraphs. Sometimes there's multiple paragraphs in a section, and sometimes the paragraphs are not the way that I would have made the paragraphs. And so orange to me is like, here's a section. If I see orange blocks, I know this is a section of text. That's what orange is. Red and green are good and bad. Red is bad, green is good. And then yellow is the main point. So let me tell you what we're going to be doing. I'm going through John, as you know, and I'm to John 7 and 8 now. That's the text where I am. And it came time to prepare for this lesson. I think I was doing it last Sunday, and then Monday, and then Tuesday, and it was just a bear for me. Ask Mark. I went on and on with Mark. First of all, he has to see me in the mornings. And when I am doing something like this and it's not working out very well, I get a little cranky. Especially when, we got Christmas coming up and I got to get stuff done. I don't have time for this, for John 7 and 8 right now. And so I got this schedule that I'm working on, and John 7, 8 is not participating in my schedule that I'm working on, and Becky has to deal with me. And so I want to tell you what this is tonight. Tonight is not a sermon. And tonight is how I went through John 7 and 8. When I read through it a couple of different times, and I was thinking, what am I going to do with this? What is it saying? I mean, you read through the text, and it's like, these chapters, I think John 7 and 8, these are the chapters in the Gospel of John where you read it, and you're just like, what did he just say? Like, I don't understand it. And so I have a way that I read through my text to try and figure out what's going on. And I will almost always do it on I can either do it on my app. I'll do it on my app tonight where you can see, or I'll print out a piece of paper and I'll go through. And what I thought was doing this, I thought, you know what? Instead of I did step 1, which is to try and figure out what the text says. Step 1 is, what does it say? But that's not a sermon. The sermon is, now that I know what the text says, make it into a sermon. What does it mean? What does it mean for me? But I thought, since that was such a bear for me and trying to figure out what's going on in John chapter 7 and 8, I thought it might be useful if you want to just walk through the process with me, so that when you approach a text yourself and you say, hey, I'm going to read the Bible, and I want to know, what does it say? What's going on in this text? This is the way that I do that. And so I thought maybe we would do that together tonight. And, it might be useful for you, and you can say, okay, I learned something and I'm ready to approach a text and do this, or maybe not. I would like your feedback with going through the text together. If it's a dumpster fire, we won't do it again. But if it's useful, then maybe we'll do this more as we read through some different texts. But okay, so let's do this. I'll explain the colors and what we're going to do as we roll through this here real quick. Let's do this. Let's start in verse 1 and read down to verse 5. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now the Feast of Booths was at hand, so his brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you're doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For not even his brothers believed in him. I said that I was going to read through that section. Let's keep going. Let's go down. Let's probably do about verse 13 is where we'll read to. Not even his brothers believed in him. Verse 6, Jesus said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to the feast, for my time has not yet fully come. After saying this, he remained in Galilee. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in private. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, where is he? And there was much muttering about him among the people. While some said, he's a good man, and others said, no, he's leading the people astray. Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly of him. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump to something. Instead of asking you all about this, I'm gonna just jump to one of the conclusions that I've come up with in John chapter 7 and 8. You're going to see this over and over and over again. John chapter 7 and 8 is this back and forth conversation. You're going to have somebody says this, Jesus says this, somebody says this, Jesus says this. And a lot of the problem is, what are the opponents of Jesus saying, and what is the answer that Jesus is giving them? It's a little difficult sometimes to get that, but it's that back and forth. And so with that back and forth, now I've got something to work with in terms of figuring this out. So here's the first thing that I'm going to do. I have a timestamp here. So after this, I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn it orange, because orange is a section for me. And so here is my first section. It starts with, after this, here comes a story. And I'm going to use red and green as the bad guys and the good guy, Jesus. And it's going to help me to see on my page, if I'm figuring out what is somebody saying here, it's going to help me to see, this is what the bad guy says, this is how Jesus responds. And I don't know what the answers are. I don't know what they're saying. I'm just able to see it. I'm a visual creature. And if I can see it, and it helps me a little bit. So the first people who have something to say to Jesus are his brothers. So I'm just going to say, I think for visual sake, I'm going to do a lot more than I normally would, probably. So his brothers said to him in verse 3, and that's going to be read because this is the group of bad guys. These are the opponents. This is what his brothers said to him. And then Jesus responds in verse 6, and I want to see what Jesus has to say. That's going to be green. Jesus is the good guy. So I've got a section, and here's what the brothers say, here's what Jesus says. It's just broken out like that. Now, here's the hard part. And this is the part where I would like to have some input. Let's hear what you have to say about this. I use yellow to say, what's the main point? And you might need to read it a couple of times, and it'll be helpful, I think, to read more than just 3, 4, and 5 for what the brothers said, because as you move throughout this section, when you read Jesus' answer, here's what Jesus said in reply. It helps you to know what you were looking for in the first part. And so that might help. So this is a question. This is the first open question here on this. What's the point? What did his brothers say? And I'm going to highlight it in yellow. I want to look down and I want to say, what's the point of this text? What's the question? The brothers' question. It's the real question. It's talk time. I don't want to just, the brothers said all of it, yellow, yellow, yellow. No, I want to be able to just look at my page and say, what did they say? What's their question? Or their comment? Yeah, Ryan? Oh, sorry. I can see. I did. That's exactly what I have too. I turned up my hearing aids, so I didn't come prepared for a class time, so now I am. Yeah. Show yourself to the world in verse 5. I'm going to make that yellow. That's exactly what I had too, Megan. And what's Jesus' response to the brothers who say, show yourself to the world? What did he say? I need help. Yeah, it's not time for that yet. And did you notice that there's 2 of those there? That kind of makes it easy to figure out what he's saying, because if he says it twice, we'll know that there's something going on there. My time has not yet come is going to be yellow. And then I'm going to go to the end of verse 8. My time has not yet fully come. And all of this other stuff, I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just trying to read this. Remember, we're not to sermon time yet. We're to understanding time. We're trying to understand what the text says. And so what I want to do is I want to say, what's going on here? And I can already do this with this one. What's going on is his brothers say, hey, why don't you show yourself to the world? And Jesus says, it's not time for me to do that yet. Well, that's not hard at all. With just a couple, and not only that, but you've marked it so you can see it and remember it and scan the page, and now you're ready to go in 5 years when you come back to this text. And so that's what we're going to be doing. What we just did, we're going to do that with John 7 and 8. It's easy enough. Here's what the bad guy says. Here's what Jesus says. What's the main point? Now, I will tell you this. If I was going to do this all the way to the end of the road, the next step would be to take that point. What does it say? Why don't you show yourself to the world? Because it's not time for me to do that yet. And that's going to be the sermon. That's what we're going to develop into the, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? And if you wanted to make a sermon out of that, there's just a million things that we could do with that. You could look at any situation that you're in life right now and you would say, why am I in this spot right now? Why is this happening? God, why don't you do something about it? And the answer is, it's not time for me to do something about it yet. Because when it is time for him, then he does. But see, that's the next step where we make a sermon, and we're not making a sermon tonight. We're just learning what the text says. That's the point of this. So I'm going to jump down to our next section. I'm sorry no, I'm not really sorry because it's going to be too long if we don't. But I'm going to give you my sections that I came up with. And you have timestamps in verse 14 about the middle of the feast. I got a timestamp that tells me that I'm at a new section. Always look for timestamps, especially in the Gospel of John, when he says, oh, hey, now we're at a different point in time. Something new is about ready to happen. So we got a new section, orange. Verse 14, let's do this. Let's read down to verse 18. About the middle of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and began teaching. The Jews, therefore, marveled, saying, how is it that this man has learning when he has never studied? So Jesus answered them, my teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. Now let me just stop here and say, you see what I'm talking about? If you just are trying to read it, what did we just read? Like, that's the way that I process stuff. I'm going to have to read that 30 times before it makes any sense to me. And that's what I do. That's what we're doing here. So we've got our groups of people. I'll give you those because it's easy enough. You have the Jews in verse 15. The first time it was the brother. This time it's the Jews. So that's going to be red. And then in verse 16, Jesus answered them. Jesus is good, so he's going to be green. And now the question is going to be, what did the Jews say, and what was Jesus' answer to them? If we can just take like one yellow highlight to see the big point. I think the opposition point is easy enough on this one because it's only like one sentence. But what did they say? What are we going to highlight yellow?
He's never studied.
Okay. He's never studied is the explanation, though. The problem, I think, I mark this, and listen, this is going to be another thing. You might highlight something different from me. I'm going to do this, though. How is it that this man has learning? And I think on my page, when I went through on paper, I did the whole thing. Except for what you just said right now, he's never studied. And me responding to it right now is like, oh no, but there is a main point. And the main point is, who does he think he is? How does he know this? So and it's the Jews, so we're talking about the religious leaders, the bad guys in the Gospel of John, and they're listening to what Jesus has to say, and their question is, where did you get this? Oops, I might have just gave away the second part. Where did you get this? So what's Jesus' answer? Which one are you going to highlight for that? Yeah, Lena?
I would highlight, if anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God.
Why that?
Because the argument is, they're arguing whether how he has this knowledge, and it's from God, but if they have pure motives, then they would know that it was from God.
Okay. So I would just nudge on that just a little bit and say, you said that it's from God. How do you know that it's from God? Because that's the question. Where'd you get this? And how do you know that? Yep, Cindy.
Verse 18.
What's that?
Verse 18.
The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. How is that an answer to the question, where did he get this? You see what I'm saying? This is not easy to do. This is the reason why I do this all together, because it's like we're trying to figure out, what does it say? This is the first step in our Bible study. I'll tell you what I did. In verse 16, the question is, where did he get this? How is it that this man has learning? I'm going to do verse 16. My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. I think that's Jesus' answer. Where did you get this, Jesus? From him. From the one who sent me. It's not mine. It's the one who sent me. That's where it came from. And all this other stuff around this main point, it's not my teaching, it's God's teaching. God is where I got this teaching, the one who sent me. If you can see that that's Jesus' point, then a lot of the things that Lena said and that Cindy said, I think really start to fill out that main point. If anyone's will is to do God's will, I want to know what God has to say. If your desire is to do His will, then you will know whether my teaching is from God or whether I'm speaking on my own authority. You might even do something yellow, whether or not my teaching is from God, because that's, I think, what he's really pointing to there. I also did something, this is a little bit different here. In verse 19, I'll try and keep the verse that I'm starting at the top of the screen so we can all find it nice and easy. In verse 19, I think that this flows. I'm not really sure how to highlight it, so I just did yellow again, because yellow is, hey, I want to see that. But I look at verse 19 in this context. Where did he get this? I got it from God. In verse 19, has not Moses given you the law, yet none of you keeps the law? And I think what is happening here is Jesus is saying something like this. You want to know where I got this teaching about the law? You all have the law, and not a single one of you does it. So how about this? How about we not worry so much about who gave it to you and where does it come from? Everybody in the room is, where did you get this? Who do you think you are? And he says, hey, when we're talking about the law here, Moses has given you the law, and yet you don't even bother to keep it. So it's kind of like we're wandering down a track of something that doesn't even matter. It's not a part of the conversation. I'm going to jump down. I'm going to read 19 to 24 there. Has not Moses given you the law, yet none of you keeps the law? Why do you seek to kill me? And the crowd answered, I'm not going to mark that one. You have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you? And Jesus answered them, not going to mark that one either. You can if you want, though. I did one work, and you all marvel at it. I think he's referring to John chapter 5, where he healed the lame man at the pool of Bethesda. Remember, he did it on Saturday, and it made everybody mad. He said, I did one thing, and everybody lost their mind. Moses gave you circumcision. Not that it is from Moses, but from the fathers. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. So it's not like all activities are prohibited on the Sabbath. You guys do things on the Sabbath that God told you to do. You circumcise on the Sabbath. And so his response is verse 23, if on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision, so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? Still under the umbrella of, where did you get this stuff? And he said, hey, we all do what God told us to do. And I did this one in yellow also in verse 24, because this seems to me to be the main point. Jesus says, do not judge by appearance, but judge with right judgment. here are these. Where did he get this? And Jesus says, you're not using your brains. You're not using right judgment. I did one thing and you lost your mind about it, but you do things on this that you're not using right judgment. And so the overall theme seems to be, hey, use your brain. That's what I wrote in my margin here. Use your brains. Okay. Let's move on. Verse 25. I know that we could spend a lot more time on a lot of these, but I got to get through 2 chapters, so I'm going to keep rolling. I'm going to have a new section here. If I'm writing in my Bible, I like writing on paper in my Bible a lot better. I'm just going to take an orange line. I'm going to write it. I'm going to do this right now because this is going to start a new section, and it's the only thing that I can highlight. So that's going to say to me, hey, new section. In verse 25, we have a new group of people. Some of the people of Jerusalem therefore said. We have the opposition. And the question is, what did they say? Let's read it. Is not this the man whom they seek to kill? And there he is, speaking openly, and they say nothing to him. Can it be that the authorities really know that this is the Christ? But we know where this man comes from. And when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from. Let's read the response, and that might help us to figure out what he said. So that's going to be in verse 28. So Jesus proclaimed. Now I'm to Jesus. He's going to get a green. Verse 28. So Jesus proclaimed as he taught in the temple, you know me, and you know where I come from, but I have not come of my own accord. He who sent me is true, and him you do not know. I know him, for I come from him, and he sent me. So they were seeking to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him because his hour had not yet come. Yet many of the people believed in him. They said, when the Christ appears, will he do more signs than this man has done? So let's do our first question there. Some of the people come and they said, what? What's the main point? What are the people saying? What's our main question here? You have to talk loud to me, Ryan.
I think they're caught up on the where is he from. That seems to be what Jesus answers. They end with, well, there's no way he can be the Christ because we know where he's from. And Jesus says, actually you don't. You don't know where I come from.
Yeah. I love that you did that, though, because you used the answer to figure out what the question was. I did that same thing on this one. So let's do this. In verse 27, I'm going to make that my yellow point, my main point. We know where this man comes from, but when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from. I don't really like to do this. It gets a little cluttered, but I just went ahead and did that whole verse yellow because my main question is, where is he from? How is this going to be the Christ when we know where he comes from? We know who his parents are. And this is, if I was going to do this sermon then, you've got all of these references to other places like Matthew 13, where Jesus talks about a prophet has no honor in his hometown. The thing that people got hung up on was, wait a second, we're talking about this as the Messiah. You grew up with us. Like, we know who your mom is. We know who your brothers are. We know who your sisters are. And so the main thing seems to be, we know you. But when the Christ appears, no one's going to know it. He didn't just grow up among us, is the main point. And so then, Ryan, what is his answer? You went to the answer to get to the question. What would you do for the answer?
I think it's 29. Sorry,
That's what I did too. I just did, for I come from him. And I like that you made this point. Jesus is going to get more into this a little bit, like in verse 28, the end of verse 28. He who sent me, you could do that one in yellow too. The one who sent me. He who sent me is true, and him you do not know. So their question is this the Christ? How is that possible? We know where he comes from. And he said, I come from him, and you don't know him. That's who you don't know. And what a slap in the face to say to the Jews, you don't know God, the one who sent me. And so I'm going to move into the next section here, verse 32. Let's read 32 to 36. The Pharisees heard the crowd muttering these things about him, and the chief priests and Pharisees sent officers to arrest him. And Jesus said to them, I will be with you a little longer, and then I'm going to him who sent me. You will seek me, and you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come. And the Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we will not find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What does he mean by saying, you will seek me and you will not be able to find me, and where I am, you cannot come? So I have a new section here that's going to be orange. And Jesus instigates this one. Verse 33. Jesus then said, that's going to be green, and the Jews respond in verse 35. The Jews said to one another, that's going to be red. And so now we have our conversation. What is the thing that Jesus said that made him upset, and what is the thing that the Jews replied with? What are going to be the main points in that? Okay. And also, you know what's cool? We can follow. You don't know where I came from, the one who sent me. The next line is, I'm going to the one who sent me. And their response is, what are you talking about? Where are you going? So let's go ahead and do that. In verse 33, I am going to him who sent me. Main point. The Jews respond, where does he intend to go that we will not find him? I think I'm going to do this though, especially since we're going to see something on this a little bit later. Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What do you mean you're going to him who sent me? And they're trying to be nasty about it, and it's like, you're going back to the Gentiles where you came from. No. It's kind of funny, though, the irony, because that's how the gospel ends. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep rolling. Verse 37. I'm going to do this. I'm going to read a long section, 37 to the end of the chapter. And we have a timestamp. So that's going to be the mark of our new section. On the last day of the feast, that's going to be orange for me, so I can say new thought. And let's read this whole last part of the chapter. On the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. Now this he said about the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive, for as yet the Spirit had not been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. So if we were going to do a sermon, that text would be the text of a sermon, and we would say, what's Jesus saying there? For our purposes, though, what I would like to do as I read through these last couple of verses of chapter 7 is, how about this? Let me go ahead and point you to this real quick. Verse 43, I'm going to highlight this yellow. So there was a division among the people over him. I think that's going to be our main point. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, what was the division among the people over him? And this is where you start getting super excited. Julia is my Bible nerd friend. You know, this is where we're like, oh, I can't believe what's about to happen. There are 7 things that people were saying about Jesus. And you just write 1, 2, 3. And then when you get to 7, it's like probably not accidental. So what are the 7 things that people were saying about Jesus? Verse 40. When they heard these words, some of the people said, is this really the prophet? Others said, this is the Christ. But some said, is the Christ to come from Galilee? Has not the scripture said that the Christ comes from the offspring of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David was? Wait a second, how are you going to say that this is the Christ? Because, interesting, before they were like, where does the Christ come from? And now they know where the Christ comes from Bethlehem. But there's division among the people. We're all asking questions. Verse 43, there was a division among the people. Now we have another group. This is going to be number 3 in verse 44. Oh, wait, did I marked number 3. I marked in verse 41, I did, others said, this is the Christ. And then I did this as number 3. But some said, is the Christ to come from Galilee? So different things. Now I'm on number 4. Number 4, verse 44. Some of them wanted to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him. So there's what some of the people were doing. Let's put him in jail. Verses 45 and 46, this is going to be number 5. The officers then came to the chief priests and Pharisees and said, why did you not bring him? And the officers answered, no one ever spoke like this man. I don't know who he is, but what I do know is that nobody talks like him. He's special for sure. Verse 47 is number 6. The Pharisees answered them, have you also been deceived? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd does not know the law. This crowd that does not know the law is a curse. So the Pharisees are like, it can't be anything special because none of us have believed in him. And then number 7 in verses 50 on, Nicodemus, who had gone to him before and who was one of them, said to them, does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? And they replied, are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet arises from Galilee. So here we have, the people are divided about what they say about Jesus. And here are 7 different things that people are saying about Jesus and responding to him. Now I'll say this again. I'm not going to do it. But now that we have that text, different people say different things about Jesus, and here are some options. That would probably make a great sermon. What are some things that people say about Jesus? Or the people were divided about Jesus. What does the world say about Jesus? And so we would make a sermon out of that. Okay, chapter 8. I'm going to skip the woman caught in adultery. We talked about that this morning. So I'm going to go to verse 12. Our back and forths are going to get a little bit more rapid fire. Verse 12. Again, Jesus spoke to the excuse me, I'm sorry. Again, Jesus spoke to them, green, and this is what he said. I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So the Pharisees said to him, here's the response. Let's make that red. Verse 13, so the Pharisees said to him, you're bearing witness about yourself. Your testimony is not true. What are we going to highlight there? What did Jesus say, and what was the Pharisees' response? Who's talking? Sorry. Was it Tyler? Nick? More? Brennan? Nobody. Got it. I'm hearing things. Happens all the time. John? Okay. You know what I'm going to do? Yeah, that's right. I'm the light of the world. What I'm going to do, because this is the Gospel of John, though, I'm just going to highlight I am. Jesus makes a claim. You could do I am the light of the world. That'd be perfectly fine. I am this. And their response is, you're bearing witness about yourself. And so it's kind of like this. I am the light of the world. And their response is, so says you. Like I could tell you, I'm Napoleon, and I'm going to conquer France. And you would all look at me and you would say, you say it, but that doesn't mean it's true. And so in verse 14, Jesus answered. That's going to be green because now we have his response. And let's read verses 14 through 18. And I would like for you to say, what's a point? 14 to 18. The Pharisees say, so says you, you're the light of the world. And what is Jesus' response to that? Verse 14. Even if I do bear witness about myself, my testimony is true. For I know where I came from and where I am going, but you do not know where I'm from or where I'm going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. Yet even if I do judge, my judgment is true, for it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law it is written that the testimony of two people is true. I am the one who bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness about me. So what's our main point? Also, I would just like to say this. See what I'm talking about? You just read that answer that Jesus gives, and I say, what? But what is it, Ryan?
I would say the latter part of 18, the Father who sent me bears witness about me.
So we have the Father who sent me bears witness about me as one of the main points. Let's go ahead and make that yellow. But what about this quote in verse 17? In your law it is written that the testimony of two people is true. Who are the two people?
Him and the Father.
Me too. Because remember, they said, you bear witness about yourself. And he says, yeah, that's right. And my witness is true. But it's not only me, it's also my Father. So I'm going to do that also. I am the one who bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness. Because the law of Moses said the witness of two witnesses, the testimony of two witnesses is true. And so in verse 19, they said to him, therefore, so I'm going to mark this. I'll show you at the end of this lesson why I'm marking they said, he said. I'm going to just roll through this text. And once we have it marked out and we see who's speaking and what the main points are, in 12 seconds, you can just roll through this whole conversation. It makes perfect sense now. Got to do the work first. Verse 19, they said to him, therefore, where is your Father? Well, that's going to be easy enough. It's the only thing that they say. So let's make that the main point. Where is your Father? And Jesus answered. Since Jesus is talking, we're going to mark that. Verses 19 and 20, what's Jesus' answer? You know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. These words he spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. So what's his response? Their question is, where's your Father? And his response is,
If you knew me, you'd know my Father also.
yeah. I think that whole thing, it would be tempting to do that. I'm going to do this one, though. In verse 19. Well, where's your Father? And Jesus' response, you wouldn't know him if you saw him. You don't know him. You don't know who he is. Okay, where am I? Verse 20. Let's keep rolling. Oh, no. Verse 21. He makes this thing about where I'm going. Verse 21, let's mark that out. So he said to them again, so we know that Jesus is talking. And what does he say? So he said to them again, I am going away, and you will seek me, and you will die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come. So the Jews said to him, will he kill himself, since he says, where I'm going, you cannot come? Let's mark verse 22. So the Jews said. And then you know what we're doing now. The question. What did Jesus say? What was the response? So he said to them, I'm going away, and you will seek me, and you will die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come. I mark that. You can't come to the place where I'm going. Because the reason why I'm going to mark that one is because they asked the question, again, where's he going? But the first time they had this conversation, I'm going to remember this part. Remember the first time they had the conversation, they said, is he going to the Gentiles? And now this time they're going to ask the question, now he's talking about dying in your sin. Is he going to kill himself? We have these different questions. Let's start 23. I was going to say we're almost done, but we're not. I'll move faster. He said to them, that's going to be green because Jesus is talking again. He said to them, you are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. I told you that you would die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins. So they're asking this question, is he going to kill himself? Where's he from? Where's he going? What's happening here? And so he answers their question. I'll tell you where I'm from. I'm from above. And also, I am not of this world. And so they said to him in verse 25. This is their response. Oops, hold on a second. They said to him, let's turn that red. What has happened? I don't need a dictionary. Who are you? Easy enough. That's the only thing that they say. And Jesus answers, who I am. My time, I got 4 minutes left before the end of the hour, so I'm going to be done. I want to run through this with you, the whole thing, to show you this is kind of, okay, now we have something to work with at this point. But what I would like for you to do, you've got some extra text that needs to be handled left. So go through it, like when you get home at your kitchen table and talk it over. It works better if you talk with somebody about it. But this is where I've landed, and this is how I'll work through John chapter 7 and 8. It's a conversation. His brothers said, show yourself to the world. And Jesus said, it's not time for me to do that yet. The Jews said, where does this man get learning? And Jesus said, it's not mine. It's his who sent me. Some of the people said, where does he come from? We know where this man comes from, and when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from. And Jesus said, I came from the one who sent me. I come from him. Jesus says, and I'm going to him who sent me. The Jews say, what, is he going to go to the Greeks? Where's he going to go? And there's all kinds of division among the people about what Jesus is saying. I'm in chapter 8 and verse 12. Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. The Pharisees say, you're bearing witness of yourself. And Jesus says, I am bearing witness about myself. And the Father also is bearing witness about me. In verse 19, they said, where's your Father? And Jesus said, you don't know my Father. Verse 21, Jesus says, I'm going away. 22, the Jews say, what's he going to kill himself? And he says in verse 23, no, I'm from above. I'm not of this world. And the answer is, that's where I'm going. 25, so they said to him, who are you? And Jesus says, I'm going to jump all the way down to verse 28. When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know I am he. He tells us, you don't know who I am, but I'll tell you when you're going to know who I am. 31, Jesus says, the truth will set you free. And they said, we've never been slaves. What do you mean, set us free? And Jesus says in verse 34, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. That's what the truth sets you free from. 39, they start talking about how Abraham is our father. And then Jesus responds and says in 41, you're doing the works of your father all right. And they throw this insult back at Jesus. We were not born of sexual immorality, probably a slap at his virgin birth. Oh yeah? Where did you come from? You want to talk about who your father is? Jesus responds in 42, you are of your father the devil. The Jews say in 48, you have a demon. Jesus says, I don't have a demon. But if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. And the Jews say to him, in verse 53, are you greater than our father Abraham who died, and the prophets who died? And Jesus answers in verse 56, Abraham rejoiced to see my day. And the Jews say, what? You've seen Abraham? You had this conversation with him? And Jesus responds, this is the pinnacle of it all. Before Abraham, I am. And they knew exactly what he was saying because they picked up rocks to stone him at that point. That's how I work through a text. Remember the process? What does it say? What does it mean? What does it mean for me? First, we have to figure out what it says. So, I hope that's useful. I hope that you're able to print your papers out, get your highlighters out, and figure out how to work through a different text on your own. That would be the goal anyway. Cross your fingers. Is the slide ready, Eric, or do you have it blacked out? Hey, it worked. Good deal. At the end of every lesson, there's an invitation. The invitation tonight is the same invitation as always. The Jesus that we've been talking about and learning about and listening to and hearing what he has to say is the Jesus who came to set us free from our sins. And if you know what you need to do and you're ready to be set free from your sins tonight in Christ, come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song.